Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be talking about literature review search strategies and optimization paths. And my name is Ajay Mittal. I work here with the research program as one of the founding directors. And today we're joined with both Guadalupe Ramirez as well as Jeffrey Feldman. And they'll be explaining to you some important strategies and thought processes as well as systems to use to most effectively source papers for your literature review and really save you time in the long run. So without further ado, Jeff and Guada, the floor is yours.
Thank you, AJ. So let me share my screen real quick. Second. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Jeff Feldman. I've been part of the EAC research program for about a year and a half now, namely working on in the literature review program on a systematic review on syringe exchange programs, which are a type of harm reduction initiative for drug users. I graduated from UF back in 2019, and I'm currently working as a research fellow at the National Institute of Health. And Guadalupe, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, I can't top what Jeff is doing, but hi everyone, I'm Guadalupe. I graduated from UF in 2020, and I was part of Equal Access just as a regular volunteer, and I joined the research program in November when I joined Jeff's group. I have been working as a middle school math teaching assistant, so not a research fellow at the NIH, but
you're interviewing for med schools too, so don't sell yourself short.
But it's okay. So thank you so much for being in this presentation, and I hope it's gonna be really helpful for you guys, and it's gonna help you optimize and make your lives easier, because it's definitely made our lives much easier.
So basically the way we're gonna structure this is Guadalupe is going to break down the actual software that she's found herself, and that's very popular for people who do systematic reviews. That'll really help expedite the process. But before we can get into that, I'm going to kind of break down the actual process of starting a systematic review. So the parts that I'm going to cover are the first 4 steps here in this systematic review process, which involves formulating your research question, which I think a lot of you have already done that. Developing a search strategy and compiling sources, setting inclusion-exclusion criteria for screening, and then actually selecting the studies for the review. And then everything after that, namely the data extraction, analysis and synthesis, and the actual drafting of the review, that'll be left for another presentation. So this is namely focusing on the portion of the review before you have started analyzing and synthesizing data. So to start, this little logo on the right, that's the logo for the Cochrane collaboration. They basically wrote like a manual that's kind of the gold standard for systematic reviews. It's very, very helpful. I'll try to link it afterwards, but essentially a lot of the processes that we're following in this are based off of their recommendations. So for a systematic review, essentially your goal is to summarize the existing literature and data on a given topic. Which is what your research question is focusing on. And you want to do so accurately and meticulously. Since this is a type of research, obviously we're not following the scientific method the same way you would if you're doing like a study in a laboratory, but you still want to have results that are reproducible and that are unbiased. So to start, I'm going to go over how to actually not just formulate a research question, but how to state it in a way that you're going to be able to perform a systematic review based off of it. So the format that is typically followed when it comes to stating a research question is called the pico format. And pico stands for population, intervention, comparison, and outcome. So an example of a research question stated in this format, which is the one we use for our systematic review, is shown below. So for people who inject drugs, which is our population, is the implementation of syringe exchange programs, our intervention, compared to their absence, our comparison, a cost-effective method of harm reduction. And cost effectiveness is the outcome we're measuring. So I would recommend all of you who are performing systematic reviews to try to state your question, your research question in this format, because it'll be very helpful once it comes to building a search strategy and all the steps after that. So now we move to the actual search strategy component of this. So when you're doing a systematic review, obviously you're reviewing a lot of literature and you're trying to summarize the literature on a given topic or in a given field. So you're going to want to use a variety of databases and select from a bunch of different databases to kind of help you compile the list of sources and data that you're going to base your review off of. So some of the popular databases that a lot of systematic reviews use are, first of all, the Cochrane library, which this should be the first database that you check when you do any systematic review, because this is the database that includes purely systematic reviews. So you want to make sure you're not doing a systematic review on something that's already been done before. Or if you do, you want to make sure that your review is differentiated from the existing publications. PubMed is going to be your best friend for anyone who's doing a systematic review. This is kind of the gold standard for databases that are used when it comes to actually compiling your literature. They have a lot of great features in their search functions that help a lot when it comes to narrowing down which sources you're going to be looking at. We also have Google Scholar. Anyone who's used Google Scholar before knows that it usually turns up, like no matter what you search, like thousands of sources. So it's pretty overwhelming. And I would say it's, from what I've read, it's a good secondary database, meaning you can use it to kind of supplement a search on a different database, because obviously it's going to give you so many results and you can't, it's unreasonable to screen thousands of sources. So definitely look into Google Scholar, but mostly as a secondary source or a supplement to PubMed or another database. Then obviously there's a couple other ones out there like Embase and Medline, which again are all great databases. And the important thing to remember is that if you're conducting a thorough and unbiased systematic review, you want to try and use a combination of searches from multiple databases. So typically a lot of reviews or recommendations from the Cochrane library include using PubMed supplemented with maybe Google Scholar as a secondary source or a secondary database, and then maybe even adding on Embase or Medline. And that's about it for databases. So now I'm going to move into the actual process of building your search strategy. So the first thing you want to do when you're building a search strategy, again, when we're building a search strategy, we're figuring out how we're going to survey these databases to actually get our list of sources. And we want to get a list of sources that's going to be relevant to our topic and not too narrow, but also not too broad where we have thousands of sources that is going to take us years to read through. So step one, we're simplifying our research question, and then we're noting key concepts. And this is based off of our pico format. So you can kind of see in this example, this is based off of the pico format, the way I stated the research question before, but it's a little bit more simplified just for the sake of having something that we can search in a database. So the research question we have here is, are syringe exchange programs a cost-effective method of harm reduction? And you can see I've bolded some of the key concepts here, which are going to help us search articles in the database. So our key concepts are syringe exchange programs, cost-effective, and harm reduction. So now that we have our key concepts nailed down, the next step is to look for mesh terms that are associated with each of these key concepts in our research question. And if anyone who's not familiar with mesh terms, so mesh stands for medical subheadings, and it's essentially a word or phrase that PubMed in particular uses to index their literature and all their published articles. So someone actually from the National Library of Medicine reads through the articles that are published in all these different journals, all these credible journals, and will assign these subheadings to them to help people who are looking through these databases. And later on, I'll kind of show you what an actual search for mesh terms looks like. So incorporating these mesh terms into your search will ensure that you don't miss any of the relevant literature in your review. When it comes to the keywords like we described before that you're trying to search for, there's a lot of different variations for a lot of different medical terms. And mesh terms are essentially a way to make sure that you don't miss any of the variations and that you're not missing any articles just because of a difference in terminology in your search. This is the link to the actual mesh term search, which I'll show you after I'm finished with this presentation. So step 3, after we've looked for our mesh terms, then we're going to look for other popular keywords associated with our key concepts. This is going to be helpful for our searches on databases that don't use mesh terms, particularly Embase and Medline, and a lot of other databases aside from PubMed won't recognize mesh terms, so you can't really use that for searches on those databases. And the way we're going to find our popular keywords is we're going to read through some relevant articles, and we're going to note some of the terms used to refer to our key concepts from before. By noting these terms, we're going to, again, figure out what terminology people are using in different published literature to refer to our key concepts. And we don't want to miss any of these when we do our searches. So here's an example from our systematic review. So our systematic review is on syringe exchange programs, but all these other terms are used to refer to syringe exchange programs as well. We have needle exchange programs, needle and syringe programs, supervised injection facilities, supervised injection centers, and so on. All these different terms. And we want to make sure we don't miss any articles that would be relevant to our subject, but are using different terminology. So that's kind of the point of steps 2 and 3. And for step 4, now it's time to make our search query. And this is where things kind of have a little bit of a learning curve. So when it comes to actually typing your search into PubMed, they have an advanced search feature, and there's a lot of different functions on it that you're going to want to familiarize yourself with to make sure that you, again, are not missing any of the important literature that you're trying to find. So some of the things to be familiar with, Boolean operators, anyone who does programming is familiar with these, but it's essentially a way to filter out which of your search terms are going to be incorporated in the titles of the PubMed articles you're looking for, or whatever database. I'll kind of explain and elaborate more on those later on. You have truncation, which is essentially when you want to make sure that you're not missing any different like forms of like a word. For example, you could have needle exchange program, programs with like the English spelling or like the British spelling where there's like an MMES at the end. So truncation kind of helps you encapsulate all those different articles and titles when you do your search. And then we have mesh terms as well, which we just touched on. So when we're making our search query, we want to use the mesh terms and keywords from the previous steps that we came up with to make a logical search query that's going to turn up the relevant articles that we're looking for. Again, I'll kind of show a demonstration of this later on. And the most important step of this is that we want to document every step of our search strategy to make sure that our systematic review is reproducible, and to make sure that we can recount it once we draft the methods section of our review. So that's about it for developing a search strategy. Again, I'll kind of go through an example and show you our search strategy document after to basically give you an example of what that's actually going to look like. And now I'm going to move on to the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So once we've conducted our search and we have this massive list of sources, typically it's going to be a couple hundred. Again, it kind of depends on your topic. Some topics have more literature published on them, so you'll find a ton of articles. Other reviews, you might find maybe 50 articles that are relevant to, or that are even encapsulated in your search. So it kind of depends on how much research has actually been conducted on the topic that you're doing the review for. So once we've done our search and we have our list of sources, now we need to determine which of these sources we're actually going to incorporate in our systematic review. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to first set what's called our inclusion and exclusion criteria. So our inclusion criteria is essentially the standards or criteria that a source has to meet in order for us to include it in our review. And then conversely, our exclusion criteria is the criteria that a source cannot meet in order to be incorporated in our review. Every source that's in your final list of sources that you're actually going to talk about or mention in your review has to meet all of your inclusion criteria and none of your exclusion criteria. And again, I'll show you an example of what this looks like after. And then once we've set that criteria, the next step is that we need to actually screen the sources for relevance based on the criteria we set. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to have multiple authors. It can be anywhere from like 2 to however many you see fit to do it properly. You're going to have multiple authors who blindly read through each of the sources on the list, and then based on the inclusion and exclusion criteria, they're going to assess whether or not the source is going to be considered relevant for the study and whether or not they're going to include it. And what we mean by blindly is that multiple authors are going to do it individually, but not share which sources they decided that are relevant with each other, so that they're each doing it on their own, and then afterwards they'll each share their final list. And this is again where Covidence and Mendeley, which are the software that Guadalupe is going to go over, are going to be very helpful. So when we're doing screening, typically it makes sense to do 2 different run-throughs of the actual base of literature that we're starting from. So first we do the title and abstract screening, which is where the authors are going to read the title and abstract of each of the studies from the searches, and then decide whether or not to include those, or whether or not they're relevant based on the inclusion and exclusion criteria. And once we've narrowed our list down and we've screened out some sources that were found irrelevant based on the title and abstract, then the remaining sources, typically you want to do a full text screening, which is where the authors are going to read through the entire text of the studies and then determine, based on those same criteria, whether or not those are relevant. And last but not least, once you've actually finished these sections of the review, there's a program or website called Prospero, which is through, I think, the University of York, where you can submit your strategy, your search strategy, and your inclusion and exclusion criteria, and all these steps that you've taken to basically a board of people who are experts on systematic reviews, and they'll provide you feedback actually, and then if your review is found to be logical and found to make sense and there's no bias, then they'll actually publish it for other people to look at. And this resource is also a great way to see if there's ongoing reviews that haven't been published that are on the same topic that your review's on. So this is something that's kind of in addition to everything we just did. It's not necessarily a recommendation, or it's not necessarily a requirement for a systematic review, but it's definitely helpful. So that's it for my slides. And now I kind of want to walk you through what our actual search strategy looks like. So I have it pulled up here. So this was our search strategy for the systematic review that's ongoing that we're doing on syringe exchange programs. So first we have this research question here, which is the one we looked at in the PowerPoint. And the same way we did in the PowerPoint, this was broken down into the key concepts. So we had syringe exchange programs, which is our first key concept, cost effective, which was our second key concept. Our third key concept was harm reduction. And then our fourth was people who inject drugs. So when we're looking for literature to include in our systematic review, we're making sure that we find articles that have all of these, the concepts that were our target concepts, the one we're looking at, and that our search is including all the different synonyms for these different words. So first I'll show you basically how mesh terms is going to factor into that. So I'm going to first go to the mesh terms search, which is right here. So here we have the actual search on PubMed for mesh terms. So let's say we were looking at our first key concept here, which was syringe exchange programs. So I'll put syringe exchange programs into the mesh term search. And then this is going to basically turn up all the different terms that can be used to refer to the same thing. So you have all these different ways to talk about or to refer to syringe exchange programs. And we want to make sure we get every single article that encapsulates all these different phrases and ways to state the same thing. So a way you can do that and not have to copy paste this entire list into the search is that you can just look over here in the search builder. And then if you search this in PubMed, and I'll kind of give you an example of that real quick. If you search this exact terminology, then this will turn up every single article in PubMed that has those key terms.
Jeff.
Yep.
On the search builder, right under it says search PubMed, and you can just search it. And you can build the search with the Boolean operators after.
And that's why Guadalupe is taking over in the second half, because she is much better at all this stuff. So thank you for telling me that. Yeah, that makes it a lot easier. But yeah, this is essentially what mesh terms does. So you can see when we search the mesh for needle exchange programs, we're going to get articles on needle and syringe programs like this one. We're going to get articles on basically all the different synonyms, supervised injection services, all the different ways that this concept or phrase can be stated. The mesh terms will cover all those. So that's kind of what we've done here. So we found the mesh term for each of our different concepts. And then I mentioned before, we also want to find keywords, which are usually encapsulated in the mesh terms. And those keywords are going to be helpful for databases that don't recognize mesh terms. Embase and Medline, perfect examples of that. You're going to want to basically jot down a lot of the keywords or the main ways that the main different synonyms for your key concepts, so you can use them in databases other than PubMed that don't recognize mesh terms. So that's the basics of kind of how we're going to approach our search strategy. And I want to turn it over to Guadalupe to kind of elaborate a little more on that. The search strategy component of this is very complicated, and we could do a whole separate presentation on it. So that's probably something that we should save for another time, because I don't want to take up all the time for our presentation talking about it. So I'm going to turn it over to Guadalupe for now and let her show Mendeleev covidence, which are going to help us a lot.
Thank you, Jeff. So Jeff just went over a very extensive presentation as to how to start the systematic review. And the search strategy is actually something that took us so long, and it is really hard to figure out all the different peculiarities of each database. So I'm going to share with you after this. I'm going to send you guys an email I will just reply all to the email of the Zoom link with an Excel sheet that breaks down the major databases and each type of kind of peculiarity that they have, because some of them, they have different symbols so they can use for the truncations. So you have to do a little bit of coding. I don't have any coding background at all. It's not coding, but it's like similar in a way. So I'll just share that with you because it'll make your life so much easier. And let me start sharing my screen with the presentation. So what I'm going to be going over today is, after you have your search strategy, you have your research question, you are ready to input those search strategies into each database, you're going to end up with hundreds of sources. And our topic is pretty limited and narrow, just because there isn't as much research with syringe exchange programs, because they're relatively contemporary. And we also are doing the cost effectiveness of it. So even with our topic, which was so limited, I believe we ended up with like 387 references. So that can be a lot. And if you want to download each PDF and save it to your computer and have a file, a folder on your file explorer that has all those 387, go for it. But I'm going to show you guys software that makes looking at the sources so much easier, and also screening them and deciding and doing that blind screening process so much better as well. So we are going to start with covidence. So Confidence is the main software that you're going to use to screen the sources. It has other functionalities as well that I'm going to talk about for data extraction and bias assessment. But the main thing is that when it comes to blindly screening your sources, it's going to make your lives so much easier. So I'm going to do a demo right after this, but let me go over some pros and cons of this just because I want to sell it to you. I'm not getting paid for this, but I'll do it anyway. So something really important when it comes to publishing your review, when it's a systematic review, is that you're going to need a Prisma chart on how did you screen your sources? How many did you start with? How many did you deem as relevant? Which ones were excluded? Why were they excluded? Were they ongoing research that you deemed was not correct to add into your review because they hadn't reached a conclusion yet, or maybe they met that part of your exclusion criteria that you designated before. So all of that needs to be denominated, and Confidence will do that for you at the end. So it will be really, really beneficial when it comes to having all the sources necessary for the publishing process. Another great thing is that each source, after once you have all your sources, then you're going to need to do a bias assessment of each source. Sorry, I hear some is that, I don't know if that's my own or if that's,
I don't think it's yours, but
okay, sorry. So each source is going to need to have done a bias assessment, and you're going to need to talk about that bias assessment in your methods for the systematic review. So Confidence has this wonderful thing that I'm going to show in the demo, where you make a form that they help you out in building the form, that after, I'm just going to show you guys after, it's hard to explain abstractly. Another perk, it's a free trial for one review. Now, this free trial has limitations, so it only lasts 12 months. Now, it only allows a team of 2 reviewers. So only 2 reviewers could essentially say yes or no to the sources, and it only allows you to screen 500 reviews. So let's say you have a super popular topic that has tons of research on it. You might need to get that full membership for Confidence, and that I believe is $250 for 12 months, and that allows you to do 3 systematic reviews within those 12 months. So maybe, AJ, that's something that you want to look into. Now, another con is that you need a reference management software in order to upload your sources into Confidence. I put this as a con because Jeff and I also spent a really long time trying to figure out, because we had an Excel sheet with all of our sources. We spent a really long time trying to figure out how to move that into Confidence, and we could not find anything. The only thing that we could find is this reference management software that you're also going to have to get, because you need very specific file formats. It's either .xml, which that's called, that's EndNote. So if you have EndNote already, that's great. .bib and .ris. So those are the 3 different formats for bibliographies. So now I'm going to move on to sharing my Confidence, and then you guys can see the Confidence screen, correct?
yep, it's all good.
Awesome. So this is not our review, because we haven't gotten through all of it. So I would be showing you an incomplete thing. So this is the demo. And here it shows me how many conflicts I have. This is, let's say, Jeff and I were working on this. This means that we need to figure out why we're disagreeing on this issue. So then we're going to go to resolve conflicts. And then Jeff and I are going to talk about it. And then we put yes, no, or maybe. And then that resolves the conflict. And that would move into the full text screening or not. But now let me show you how easy it is to screen the sources. So you go to here, continue. And these are all the sources that you have uploaded from your your reference management software. So let's say I look at this and I think that it does meet my inclusion and exclusion criteria. I put yes. Now I read this, and by the title, I feel like it does meet my inclusion or inclusion criteria, but I'm not sure if maybe it has a specific thing that meets the exclusion criteria, and I might be no, so I put maybe. And you go no, yes, maybe, and it's incredibly simple. Jeff and I did our 300 articles in a day. So that's part of the screening method. Then when you want to do the full text review, here you have your 5 studies to screen. And then you can add the full text if you have the PDF. If you uploaded it with the reference management software that I'm going to show you, a lot of times it'll have the PDF for you already. So it'll make reading and accessing it much better. And here you would decide whether it fully meets your inclusion criteria and fully does not meet your exclusion criteria. So then this is the Prisma chart that I was going to show you guys. They built this for you, and then you can export the data. So when you go to the publisher, when you're trying to publish these reviews, each publishing company has their very own requirements for how they want things formatted. So that's how you can export this easily and into the format that whatever they want. And now we're going to go into the studies that we're going to extract. So this is important. Why? We have 2 different parts into this extraction part. We have the data extraction template and the quality assessment template. And one is white and one is blue because one is published and one is unpublished. So I'm going to show you the data extraction template first, which is published, and then I'm going to show you the quality assessment template, which is unpublished. And published and unpublished means that basically I haven't edited it yet. So once I have my data extraction template published, I can begin my extraction. So here, you would basically let, we're gonna wait for this to load. It's gonna load the paper or not. Give me a second. Okay. It has it right there. Okay, so this was working earlier and it's not working now. So let's see.
Can you try the second one? Second one.
Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna try the second one. Guess not. Well, let's pretend that there was something there. You would see it here. I swear this was working earlier, now it's not. But you would basically, let's pretend you designed this, this data extraction form, and you can customize this to your own systematic review. So Jeff and I, we are looking for very specific things when it comes to cost effectiveness. We are looking that they have a specific cost effectiveness units. So that's something that we could add. We could put cost effectiveness unit used, and we could put, it's called an incremental cost effectiveness ratio, willingness to pay threshold, all these different things, and we could click that. That way it would help us see it later into a more summarized way. You can put the type of study design, when it started, when it ended. And then the total number of participants is also important, especially when you have big randomized control trials, which we do not have with systematic, with syringe exchange programs, unfortunately, but it's okay. So then you would send it for consensus. And then you would see, you complete it, you would see if the other reviewer did the same type of form as you. So now the quality assessment template. So now I'm showing you guys how you would do, this is an unpublished form, so how you would edit it. This is really important because, as I said, in your systematic review, in the methods, you need to talk about the biases of your sources. And what Jeff and I have found is that even if all your sources you deem them as biased, a lot of us just because they're not randomized control trials, you can't blind it just because of the nature of the intervention. But there still have been systematic reviews on surgeon exchange programs, so you can still publish it, but it's still important that you talk about the biases of these sources. So you could change this. Let's say I wanted to selective reporting. I didn't want this here. How would I delete it? I could do a new domain and make something new. I'm trying to see how I deleted it. You could also start from fresh if you have another template. Cochrane, they have a lot of resources. The company that Jeff mentioned, they have their own forms. So if you wanted to copy a Cochrane form, you could do that by starting from scratch. And here you have a new one, and then you would publish it. And then for each study, you would also do the quality assessment and write whether it's and grade it with their bias. So now that I have gone over a lot of confidence on how wonderful it is, I'm going to show you why we need a reference management software and how that can make your life much easier as well. So, let me go back to my presentation first. The best reference management software out there is EndNote. People that do a lot of systematic reviews use EndNote, like EndNote, but it's really expensive. There is student pricing, but it's really hard to prove. Well, I'm not a student anymore, but it's really hard for you to prove that you're a student. It's not like you just need a ufl.edu address. Like, you need to show that you paid tuition, stuff like that. So it's kind of crazy. But that is, I believe, $115 for 1 year. I did see that UF provides it for students, but you had to access it. You needed a licensing manager. It was a very complicated way of getting it for free as well. So if someone wants to look into doing that, awesome. But you could go the easier, cheaper, and free route and use Mendeley. Mendeley, it's basically the same thing, and it's completely free. And the only thing people say is that maybe it's people that do a lot of systematic reviews at the same time. They say that EndNote is better, and that when both these softwares have extensions that you can add on Word for typing it. And I believe that the Mendeley extension is not as good as the EndNote. So those are some of the critiques for them. So now let me show you Mendeley. This is kind of like my homepage. Here I'm in the demo review just because I made this folder to do this presentation. But here, these are all the sources that Jeff and I extracted from.
So I think you need to close the presentation on like full screen. I can't see like Mendeley.
Oh, you can't see it? Oh, thank you, Jeff. Can you guys see Mendeley now?
I just see it on the Google Chrome page, like the presentation. You might need to like switch to like what screen you're sharing.
Yeah, let me stop sharing and start sharing again. Does it work now?
There you go, perfect.
Awesome. So sorry about that. So here we can see these are all the sources that Jeff and I uploaded into Covidence. So why is this great? Because let's say we go here, every single one that you see this little symbol with the Adobe thing, that means that you have a full text review. I mean, you have access to the full PDF. right here, and boom, you opened it, and you didn't even have to save it into your computer. I'm telling you, it's 387 of these things. They're gonna take up space in your hardware, so I don't think you guys want to do that.
So are you going to show them the like the where you extract it from like the website search, the PubMed search?
Yeah, I'm gonna do that.
That's
after.
the coolest part.
Yeah. So after I show you all of this, I'm gonna show you the coolest part of Mendeley. Here, let's look at a different one. Why is it not? I don't know. Okay, there we go. So if you also wanted to go to the journal that published this, takes you right there to their webpage. So it's an incredible tool. So how did Jeff and I get 387 articles into Mendeley? So now I'm gonna do a different demo, and I'm gonna show you guys, this is PubMed, and this is based on the demo review that Calvinist was doing. I don't really know what moxibustion is. Oh, it's a form of traditional Chinese medicine, which is great. So right now we have all these sources, right? And we need to upload them into Mendeley. So there's this Mendeley extension that you just open up, you wait for a little bit until it reads the whole page. It takes a second. And then you just select all, see all your sources, the ones that have the PDF available, it already grabs the PDF for you. I unselect that. And then I just go to my library. I put demo because I want to upload it to my demo and add. And now it's going to start adding all these sources from this page into my library. Now with this, I do want to say that sometimes, and I saw this when I was screening the sources, sometimes the web importer won't read the full title, or it's not perfect. So some of the sources that we had to screen, the title wasn't complete or it wasn't perfect. So then you would need to select that, look it up on your own, but it didn't happen that often. It's just sometimes it separated a title into two. It's kind of finicky. So now that I see all these check marks, I see that all my references are added. So I'm going to go back to Mendeley. I'm going to sync. So it syncs with my web importer. Waiting for it to sync. And then I go to my demo, and boom, all the sources that were just in PubMed are here. Then I would go to File. I need to select the sources first. I will select all my sources and export them. And you choose, remember how I told you that there are 3 different types of formats that Covidence allows? These are 3 of them, so this is great. So these are not, for example, Excel doesn't let you save into this file format. So I like to do .ris. You put demo collection, then you put save, and then we're gonna go back to Covidence. We're gonna import some. I guess we can't. Well, you just put, you guys know how to import a file. You put import, choose a file, and then it would add the files into here, and you would continue screening them. So again, this is incredibly helpful for systematic reviews. And there is another software that I recently found that's helpful for when it comes to actually writing the review, but we haven't used it yet, so I'm not going to present it because I don't know it yet. So another thing that if you guys wanted Jeff and I to do another presentation more detailed into the search strategy and maybe into this different software, we could do that. So that's it. That's Covidence and Mendeley. I love these softwares so much that I'm considering naming my firstborn children after them. So that's it for us.
All right. Thank you so much, Guadalupe and Jeff. I think you did an excellent job going over it in great detail. That is going to conclude the recording for today. Thank you all for watching.